Yo, 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 what is up, my fallopian tubers? Cesario Bondovario coming back at you with another video for your butt. And this is kind of a mashup video from two different videos that I've seen. I'm getting an idea together. One was Ziggy No, who in one of my and one of the comments he said like, "Hey, happy belated 420," and I was like, "Yeah, I should have made a 420 video, huh, but I was busy." And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm gonna try to make a video about cards and 420. And then another guy that I was watching, uh, he said like, "Oh, I stopped collecting cards from so and so year to so and so year," and he said, "But I wouldn't say I stopped collecting because I still kept my cards. I didn't throw them away." And I thought about that, and I was like, well, collecting is more like almost like a verb, like an action. You're collecting. You have to be active to be collecting. You could still say you were still a collector. You never stopped being a collector, but I necessarily wouldn't say you didn't stop collecting, because in my mind you kind of did. Just two things, man. So this video is just gonna be a ramble, man. It's gonna just I think it's gonna be me rambling about these two subjects. And one of the reasons that I was thinking about that is like, because I often say I stopped collecting from this year to this year, but after watching that video and I thought about it, I was like, well, I didn't necessarily stop collecting either. I just stopped going to like, I couldn't find them anymore. It seems when after high school and I moved to Kansas for 4 years, when I came back, all of a sudden, like, most card shops were closed. There was no card shows going on. Like, the malls, the card shops that were in the malls were gone. So, but back in the day, there wasn't eBay. Anyways, I never had a computer. Um, I would still buy cards through the newspaper, which was rare though. Like, I would look at the collectibles and miscellaneous stuff on the back of the pages in the newspaper, and if I saw something that I wanted as far as cards, because almost every day there was still cards for sale, but they were in the newspaper, I would inquire. And so I was just thinking like about like when I bought my Mickey Mantle ball, man, my Mickey Mantle ball, this I bought it way before social media. Um, and one of the years when I don't necessarily, like, I like to say I started collecting again in 2004, because that's when I started like seeking out card shows and seeking out card shops. So it so this was pre 2004. Like I said, like I was still collecting, I guess, even though I say I wasn't, because I really wasn't as active. But I saw this ad for a Mickey Mantle ball, right? And this is no, and this kind of relates to the difference, let's say in buying cards then and buying cards now. I was, you find it in the newspaper, and then you go meet this person somewhere, and you don't know what's gonna happen. You know what I mean? And like, so with this ball, I got this Mickey Mantle ball. It wasn't in this. I feel like I should have left it in the original little ball casing it came in, but it was so old, and a guy gave me this Mickey Mantle cube. So I was like, oh, I had to use it, after I told him I had a Mickey Mantle autograph ball. And so when I went to go buy that ball, I saw it in the newspaper, and I met this guy in Chino, right? And so, back then you call them, they leave their phone number, and you call them on the phone at home. It was before cell phones, at least before cell phones were more affordable, I guess. And so I told him, yeah, I'll meet you here at this restaurant. Yeah, I know where that's at. So I went to go meet him at this restaurant. And prior to that, I went to the bank. I had just gotten my income tax, and I took out $200, and that's the max that you could take out. And I remember I already had $40 in my wallet that I already had, and because I was gonna use that for gas. And then I took out $200, right? So I took out the 200 from the ATM and went to go meet this guy. And So I got off, they told me what kind of car they were going to be in. Met them there. They were a little late. So they pull up, and the guy gets out of the driver's seat, and he's like looks like a skinhead. You know what I mean? But even, and then the passenger that he had looked like could possibly be leader of the chapter they're in, or whatever you want to call it. More than an alpha male. And this guy was dressed like a skinhead, but I could, tell he wasn't like hard. But anyways, he gives me the ball, and he tells me about how his dad died, and he collected stuff, and he had this Mickey Mouse ball, so I was buying it for 200. So I get my $200 out of my wallet. I count it, one, two, because I just left the $40 that I had in there. It was $200. I gave it to him. He counted it, 100, 200, and then he gave me the ball, and he said, "All right, thanks," and I was like, "All right, cool," and then they start driving away, and I see them go on the street and come right back into the parking lot. They park behind me, like blocking me in, and then the the passenger guy gets out of the car, and this dude's like a big dude, all tatted down, had those two little thunder things right here where the sideburns would be, straight skinhead. And he runs up to my car, and he's like, "Hey man, you only gave him $180. And in my head, I knew, no way. There's no way I only gave him 180. I counted 200. He counted 200. Looked at my wallet. I have $40. I gave him exactly 200. And he's like, "Yeah, no, you only gave him 180. Give us another $20." And I felt almost trapped. So I was like, well, I don't care. I'll pay 220 for this ball. And I gave him another 20. And then they get in the car, and then they leave. And then I go. So even though technically I probably did get ripped off, I don't think I've ever felt like I got ripped off either way, because 220 was still a dream come true to own this ball. You know what I mean? But and now you could just buy the stuff at card shops. You could go to card shows. Like you don't have that danger factor like it used to be. Because it's the same with marijuana. You know what I mean? Back then you had to buy it on the streets, and then you have a dealer, and then if that dealer gets busted, you have to find another dealer and deal with them. I've had all kinds of them. So we're talking about marijuana, because I said this was going to be about marijuana and cards. But yeah, like I remember I used to buy from this chick, and her brother was like a big time gang member when he was in jail, and I guess this used to be his business, and she was running it while he was in jail, and I would buy from her. I got referred from a friend who would buy there. And one day, man, I went to go buy. I remember I used to work at a foundry. I don't know if you guys know what a foundry is, but that's where you melt metal and make objects. Like you just start off with metal bars, and you melt them, and you make bats, you make gauges, golf clubs, helicopter blades. Like that's how you make it. You melt the metal. So my dad just retired from that, but he I got a job with him for a while. And I used to melt the aluminum. One of the things that was crazy, you have these big old giant pots, molds or whatever they were called. And in the morning you start off, and then you just drop off all kinds of like metal bars. I worked in the aluminum department. There's magnesium, there's titanium, there's steel, there's different parts. I worked in the aluminum, so I would get these metal aluminum bars. I don't know if you ever seen those in pallets in the back of a truck. They look like silver bars, but they're aluminum. We would buy those like every day. We just get pallets and pallets of that, and I would get an ingredient basically to make whatever we're gonna make for that day, because everything was different. You had you sometimes like if you made some type of different metal, some people wanted it to be a little bit more flexible, some people wanted it to be lighter, people wanted it to be stronger, some people wanted it to be stiffer, whatever. So the way you would do that is you start off with just 100% aluminum, melt that in, and then for whatever you're gonna make, that's how you do an alloy. You would add like add a pound of scrontiums, a pound of boron, add some titanium in there, add this, bunch of different metals until you got the one that you wanted. And the reason I'm talking about this is because that's where I was working. I remember this week specifically because so what would happen is I would mix it all in, then I would stir it, and then I'd take a sample to this guy that worked on the machine, and he would put that thing, and it would get analyzed in the machine, and it would give you the percentage of how much boron, magnesium, alloy, whatever you're trying to get, and he'd be like, oh, we're off. We need 2 more ounces of scrontium. You need an ounce of boron and this and that, until you got the right mix, and then we would make the product that we're gonna make. But this one day, his machine broke down, so we fell behind a day, because that machine was broken for a day till some technician came in and fixed it. And so I went. So I had to work Saturday, so I got overtime that day, because normally it was a pretty tight ship. You worked 8 hours, 5 days a week. They planned it out pretty good. And anyways, that I got paid extra. So instead of buying my regular $20 that I would buy every Friday when I would get paid, this time I was gonna pay for $40. So I had 40. I was like, yeah, I worked some overtime, and they give me a bigger sack this time. And so went to the house, and Gracie was there, and her brother was there. He had just got out of jail, and I was like, oh, So I met him. He was, he had a shirt off. He was all crazy, prison tatted down. And then he sees me in my uniform. He's like, hey, you just get out of work? I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh man. He's like, think you can give me a job? And I'm just like. But anyways, I was like, yeah, I could probably get you in, fill out a application and this and that. He's like, oh, I don't want to fill one out. I was like, you have to, dude. So we started talking, right? And so, I told him I wanted a 40, and then he gave it to me, and then we were just talking about he wanted to work, he was asking me what I do, and he was fascinated by what I did, and he was like, oh, I want to do that. And yeah, so then once we kind of stopped talking, and I was like, all right, man, I'll see you later. He was like, all right, man, cool. Let me know about that. So I start walking out, and then I just hear a big old click, like click, and then look back, and this dude has a giant, like a giant fucking Clint Eastwood revolver, pointing at me. He's like, hey, you gonna give me my fucking $40, man? You think I'm dumb and this and that? And I was like, oh shit, dude, I just totally forgot. Got lost in our conversation, And he's like, nah, man, I'm not stupid. He's like, and he's just pointing this big ass revolver, man. It was huge, out of a Western. And anyways, I gave him the money, and then he puts the gun down. And he's all right, man. Hey, that's just business. Hopefully, bring me that application, man. I'll fill it out. And I was like, okay, yeah. You know what I mean? So I don't know why, but the dangers, man. There was also dangers in marijuana back then. So like, all my marijuana I had to buy from the streets, and all my cards I bought from the streets. And it's now is a way more of a safety net. Even if every once in a while people get scammed or whatever, it's still not as scary as it was getting it on the streets before. But anyways, so in cards you have grades, and you also have these type of grades. So you have grades in cards, and you have grades in marijuana too. They come in different grades. So those are some of the similarities, and that, I guess, people avoid getting ripped off. I guess that's a lot of people consider, like, oh, if it's in a slab, it's 100% legit. There can't go wrong. It's makes it legit, and I still don't have that mentality yet. But one of the times that I did almost get burned buying on the streets is this guy in Long Beach. Long Beach was far from me. It was like an hour away, and I'd have to drive an hour. So every Tuesday, I remember back then, I don't remember what job I had, but I used to get paid on Tuesday. So every Tuesday, I would meet him, and I told him, man, I could spend $20 every Tuesday, man, for my check. And so I would meet him, and every day I'd buy like one card. And so like I said, this is, I don't know, in the 90s, late 1990s. And every day I would go, like, this is the first card that I bought from him. And if you guys know about, well, I'll tell you right now. So this was the first card that I bought from him. He'd have a little stack of cards, and I would just pick one, and that I would buy. And this was the very first one I picked up from him. Was this Eddie Matthews. And then I think the next card that I picked up from him was this Duke Snyder. And you see a pattern here. I also bought this Sandy Koufax from him. So every day, every Tuesday, I was going driving to Long Beach, and I would get a card for $20, and these ones, that's why these ones have the mustaches. That I remember that these were the first cards I was buying from him back in the streets, and he was saying that he was selling them for his uncle. And so one of the weeks that I went, he told me, he showed me a Dr. J card, Dr. J rookie. And I was like, oh damn, yeah, that's badass. Like, and I don't know how much it's worth, but he said, like, would you give me 100 for it? He said, my uncle wants 100. And I was like, all right, yeah, man. And I remember, and I borrowed money from my dad and somebody else, one of my friends. And I went back the next day, and I got that Dr. J rookie from him for $100, and they looked clean. And I forgot what I was doing, or I think I showed it. I showed it to a friend, and right in the back, in real tiny letters, tiny, tiny, tiny print, it said reprint. He's, oh, this is not a real card. He's like, it's a reprint. And he didn't know too much about cards, but he knows what a reprint is, obviously. And he was like, this is a reprint. This is fake. And I was like, oh, shoot, And I was like, oh. So called that dude back, and I told him it was fake. He's like, no, it can't be. I said, watch. I'll meet you again, and I'll show you where it says reprint. And he's like, no, my uncle told me that's real. That's real. And so went back. Went back like the next Tuesday, and he told him, well, I'll give you your money back, and maybe you can take some extra cards, like choose some other cards. You got $100 credit, basically. And so I went back the next Tuesday, and I met up with them, and I just got my money back, and then showed me some cards, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to buy from you no more. And he's like, oh, man. He's like, hey, man, I'm sorry. That was my uncle. And I was like, I just, I can't buy from you no more. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like one of the things from the past and from now, you know what I mean, is I didn't have a circle of friends. I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have other collectors that I could have just shown them, the card, and they told me. I got lucky that my friend noticed that, because I wouldn't have. I would have just put the card away, and but so those are cards that I got, So nowadays people say like, oh well, once you get a card graded now, it's 100% legit. It can't be fake. It's not a true 100% of times, but it does give you that sense of security. So there's that difference. And then when you talk about grading, so you get, everybody knows, like with the graded cards, like this is a 10 and then this is a 1, so you can see how much better that 10 is from that 1, right? It's like 100 times in better condition. Well, not really, but price wise, just because it's a 1, it's already judged. It's a very judgmental world when it comes to graded cards. You're basically being judgmental and judging your cards. That's why I don't judge my cards. But you would say that this 1 is almost worthless. A 1 is worthless compared to this 10. And if you guys don't know, in marijuana, you also got the same thing going on. So I only get hybrids because that's what I smoke. There's sativa and there's indica, and then there's a blend called hybrid. The indica and sativa, one is more works your mind, and then one is more physical, and then I think the one that's physical makes you just chill out, but like to the point where you don't even want to work. So I can't be doing that because I work all the time. And so I get the hybrid. But anyways, what I wanted to say too is similarities in marijuana and baseball cards in the grading now. So back then, you hear me how I had the difference between buying weed now and buying weed then. I mean, for the longest time, I used to buy from a homie, Lefty, and every time I went to his house, he lives with his mom, and so I said this before. I used to carry dog treats with me all the time. In my car, I always had dog treats. Because my friend that I used to buy bud from, he had 2 vicious pit bulls, man. At least they always looked vicious, and every time I went, they would bark, and he'd have to put them in the backyard, so I could come in. And So one day I just I had I had my own dogs, and I had the treats that I had just bought for them for my dogs in the car when I went to his house. And then I was like, I wonder if they'll take a treat from me. And I took these dog bones, and and I put them by the fence while they were barking at me, and they smelled them and they ate them, and they were in love. Like, my friend had never given them treats before. He wanted them to be mean dogs. He's a drug dealer, so he wanted the protection. And man, they turned into like baby puppies with me, and I would give him dog treats. And every time I would come over to go buy some weed from him, his dogs are waiting for me, like, to give him dog treats, and I give him dog treats. And man, and then they would get on their back, and I would scratch their belly, and my friend was pissed. I mean, and he was super pissed. I didn't realize how pissed he was till another friend told me, yeah, Lefty told me about that you give his dog treats, and he's like, yeah, the whole purpose, he wants him to be mean. He's never seen that side of those dogs before, and they were just, so anytime I went to his house, they would wag their tail, and and I could play with them, and he didn't like that so much. But either, when I would go to his house, like, I would have to stay there like 20 minutes to a half hour. Like, that was kind of like a rule he had, so his mom wouldn't know that people were just walking in and out buying drugs. So everybody that would come to his house, you had to wait there like half an hour. He didn't want you to just come in and out and make it obvious. And plus, he always thought it was being watched by the cops. But so that was kind of like a downside of it, is like, but every once in a while there'd be so many people there that are coming, and it was always a good time there because all your homies are there and stuff. So it was a good time. Same thing. I had my friend Sal, another dude that I used to buy bud from back in the day. He lived with his parents too, so every time I'd have to go buy bud from him, if my friend Danny wasn't available, I'd have to pick him up at the corner of his house and drive around for like 10 minutes. While every time I bought from him, we always had a match. I would light a joint, I would roll a joint, and he would roll a joint, and we drive around smoking them, and then I would drop them off. But it's not like today where I could just go to a damn shop, tell them, hey, I want this, they give it to me, and I leave. It's a 5-minute process. When back then, man, it would take a half hour to an hour every time, which was killer. So man, the differences between buying bud back then and buying bud now is almost the same thing as buying cards back then and buying cards now. Like, it was a little bit more dangerous and sketchy back in the day. Now it's so convenient. People could just, I personally don't buy online, but I mean, people could buy cards from home, never leave their house. I personally like to go to card shops and card shows, and I guess I'm an extrovert. I like to talk to people. So I don't know. I guess that's about it. Oh yeah, no. So like I said, the grades. PSA. Same thing with marijuana, and so marijuana is like, so say this was cherry pie, and you can see there it was 2 grams. This one is the Larry Bird. I like to buy the cards named after athletes. When I see a strain that's Mike Trout, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, I like to buy them. Even the LeBron. But this one is the Larry Bird. And so, say this one was 2 grams, but I guess this one will be like a PSA 9. Alright, and it was $60 for just 2 grams. So the $60 fit in here. This one I bought for $50, and it was 5 grams. And this whole bag was filled. Obviously, I've already gone through most of it, but this whole bag was filled. And that was 50. And then this one was Lucky Charms, also 5 grams. It was the same amount of weed in here in this, but let's say this is like a PSA 7 or PSA 8, and this is like a PSA 5. So this 5 grams was $20, and this 5 grams was $30. And then this 2 grams was 60. But there's even higher grades than that, because there's some called like connoisseur and stuff like that, and you'll get like 1 gram for $50, which is pretty crazy. It's basically a black label. You know what I mean? So I don't know, guys. That was about it, man. How to do a 420 video. Happy belated 420. And Ziggy, I did this video. This idea came to my head talking about weed and cards. Oh yeah, and also it's the same thing, you know, like when I say for I could buy this for $50, or I could buy the same amount, you know, or I could buy 10 grams of this for the same price as 5 grams of this, you know. And it's kind of like the same thing with grading. Is like I could buy one card of this because it's a 10, or I could buy probably like 20 cards of this one because it's a 1. Or, you know, same thing when you buy a high end, perfectly, you know, a perfect good card, you could buy one, you know, great vintage card, or you could buy like 3 or 4 also awesome vintage cards, but that aren't in the greatest shape. But who gives a damn? You know, and that's the route I'd rather take. I'd rather have a bunch of cards that I want as opposed to having one card that I'm just admiring the whole time. It gets old after a while. Nah, just kidding. But anyways, yeah, man, that was just my chat. You know, hopefully this is something you guys could listen to on your drive somewhere. But yeah, I think I covered my bases as far as talking about the similarities between marijuana and baseball cards. Love the hobby. Just keep collecting baseball cards forever, I say. Ciao.